What I want to speak about today reminded me of a story that one of the students had told me after reflecting on his kind of upbringing. His parents got divorced when he was kind of at a young age, and he said when they first got divorced, I thought it was kind of a real blessing to my life. He goes, because my dad, after he moved away, became more generous with me than he'd ever been while he lived at home. He started buying me all these new things, even a new car, and just if I ever had a need, I could go to him, and he'd always give me that money. And he goes, one of my friends one time told me, you're so lucky to have a father who always provides so much for you. And he goes, just from the depths of my heart, even as just a teenager, I remember my whole being saying, I would trade every single thing he ever gave me if I could just have him back in the house. And that reminded me of when Christ first called me to be a priest. Many years ago, when I first got the call when I was in college, I was so afraid to let go of family and of my dreams for what my life would be. I started praying so much more than I ever prayed. I started working with St. Vincent de Paul all the time and fasting and doing everything I could to telling God, I'll give you all these things, just not the priesthood. And I just remember one time I was in prayer and I just felt Christ looking at everything that I was handing over to him and just putting them to the side and saying, I never asked for any of this from you. The only thing I've ever asked was you. And that really goes to the heart of what Christ sees in this widow. Because in heaven, all we're made for is communion. Divine communion with God. The Holy Trinity is forever total gift and total receptivity of one another in poverty and total self-surrender. And the Father is the one who gives his Son to this world, and Christ offers himself completely to us to inspire in us that same total gift back to him of ourselves, of our lives. And sometimes riches can become an impediment to a real self-gift because we offer things outside of ourselves and we call that love. So all of life is a preparation of learning how to give ourselves completely to God and to those around us as we're meant to be in heaven for all eternity. And anything less than that is kind of a foretaste of hell. It's a hell I think a lot of people have experienced when, especially in America, we have such a surplus of material wealth and yet so much isolation and depression amongst our people. And it made me think of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I don't know if that movie's too old for you guys, but there's this really cool scene that I couldn't stop thinking about. It was totally anointed by God while I was writing this. And it was when his friend Cameron, he's looking at his father's Ferrari. And he says, my father, his Ferrari, this was his life, his passion. And he's just looking at this car and he starts to his whole face gets so red and he starts to just smash on the bumper with his foot, just denting it in. And he says, he keeps screaming, who do you love? A car. Who do you love? A car. And you can just feel the pain that he must have had grown up with so long. Like your father cares more about this vehicle and put more effort and care than he ever did into you. And in a sense, I think that's kind of the pain that Christ himself felt when he was watching these people come into the temple. The pain of the scribes, you care more about what other people think about you, or you care more about your money and your position than you do about us and this relationship. Because we know deep down that true love can only be a gift of self. It's what everybody is longing for. It's not about the money. It's about sending a message. No, you didn't get it. Joker. All right. So that's what our money's meant for, though. It's meant to send the message to God of everything I have is from you and for you. And sometimes our poverty is the best way to communicate that to God. So I want to focus today on the gift of poverty in our lives. And it goes far beyond material. Could be anything that we're going through can become the greatest offering that we have to give to God when we come to church. It reminded me of Saint Elizabeth of the Holy Trinity. And I was thinking about her a lot this week, about her, what she came to in her spirituality. And then I came to find out her feast day is actually this weekend. So it was a happy coincidence. But she was a young woman who was in the Carmelite order. And she died at a very young age, at I think 30, after just 10 years in living in Carmel in France. But when she was 7 years old, her father had died. Same time when she was going to receive her first Holy Communion. So she comes in with just her mom and her sister, and she just feels the emptiness of the poverty of not having her father with her. And she said in that moment, when she was receiving her first Holy Communion, she came to understand that Christ was giving himself completely to her in the Holy Eucharist. And she said the poverty of not having her father in her life opened her eyes to the gift that Christ was giving to her. And in that moment, she promised Jesus that she would be a nun, that she would give herself completely back to Christ in that same self-gift. And when she was 13, she vowed her virginity to God. And by 20, she'd entered into the Carmelite order. But very soon after she got in, she got really sick. She got Addison's disease, which is a really painful ailment of the stomach. It spreads to the whole body. She got so sick once she entered into religious life, she couldn't even go to prayer with the other nuns. She was just bedridden almost all of the time. She realized in that, she found her vocation. She said, in heaven, we're destined to be nothing but a contemplative gaze into God, a praise of his glories, what she called it, that all of our being will be given over to God and received from God. And as she laid in her sickbed for years, she would just see this crucifix above her. And she said, in the ultimate moment of Christ's life on this earth and the revelation of God and the gift of our salvation, he had nothing to offer but his crucified body on the cross. And in every single Mass, what does he give us? Nothing but his own presence, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Holy Eucharist. And she said at that moment, she realized that her illness and her poverty was the greatest gift that God had given her, because she had nothing else to offer him but her broken suffering. And in that, she was offering her entire livelihood. But we need faith. We need faith to realize that Christ sees that offering. I think that was the problem with the scribes. The scribes were doing everything for show for other people, and God rejected it. No one saw that gift of the widow. It was something very intimate between her and God. And what God sees in secret, he blesses in secret. St. Elizabeth, she had this saying called the sacrament of the present moment. That just as the sacraments communicate grace from God in baptism, in confirmation, Eucharist, confession, that the present moment is a sacrament where God is communicating himself to us. But we have to be aware of his presence in order to enter into that divine communion right here and now where we're at. St. Elizabeth of the Holy Trinity, she recognized Christ's presence in the Eucharist being given over to her. And that recognition of Christ's presence inspired in her the regifting of her entire life back to God. Now, it doesn't say it in the text, but what if that widow, everyone knew Jesus at that time. And Jesus is at the end of his life. He's in Jerusalem to go towards the cross. Widows oftentimes were also homeless. They were extremely, vulnerable to all sorts of thieves, to violence of all sorts. They're extremely, the suffering they had was incredible in that time. But they oftentimes were out in the streets just walking around because they had nowhere to go. And Jesus was always preaching in the streets. So what if she had seen Jesus? She had listened to his words. What if when she was walking into that temple, in the midst of the scribes going in and giving their great contributions, making their great prayers, being seen by so many, what if they didn't even notice Jesus? Which is it's a temptation even for us now. We can come to the church for many reasons, and Jesus might be the last of those reasons. To be seen by so many other people, or seen for what I'm doing. And yet when this poor widow walked up, maybe she had those 2 cents left. And she was debating what she was going to do. But she locked eyes with our Lord. And she saw that Jesus Christ was looking at her. That he saw her. And he noticed her. And maybe that glance alone inspired in her that act of faith to give that money. Jesus sees our sacrifices. I think that's one of the most important lessons we could take from this gospel. Jesus sees your sacrifices. The sacrifices that you make to live faithful to him in this world, he sees it. In the midst of so many people who have rejected the faith, rejected its teachings, who aren't coming to Mass today, you've come. And Jesus Christ sees that. In the midst of so many people who have thrown away morality, tradition, where premarital sex is the norm, the hookup culture, to use contraceptives even as married people, to support abortion, same-sex marriage, all of that. Why? Because everybody else around us believes it. You know, we're cultural people. So if I'm not looking at the Lord, and I'm not doing what I do because I'm looking at him and receiving his gaze, I'm going to look at what everybody else around me is doing and I'm thinking, and I'm going to conform myself to them. That's what the scribes were doing. But we set ourselves apart here. And Jesus sees that. Especially parents. It's not as bad. There was so much crying in the 8:30 Mass. At first I thought it was some of my college students who've been coming to my office a lot this week, but it was actually just the babies. And there was just so much noise all over the place. And you just imagine what the parents have gone through to give their lives day in and day out to their children, especially to raise them in the faith, to feed them with the truth, when so often in our age it's easy to walk away, or just to give your children a tablet, or hand them over to daycare. It's like day in and day out, parents have given themselves to the raising of their children in right order. Jesus sees that. God is attentive to the sacrifices that you make to live this faith. And it's really important that we recognize that we know that. Because what it does is it allows us, it gives us even more fire to be faithful to him. Because it's not just me and my will and I'm white-knuckling it. The Lord will take care of me because he sees me. There's one man, I just read a near-death experience, really beautiful. It's not beautiful that he died, but it's beautiful that he got to see Jesus right after he died. And he had this experience with our Lord. And he said he had this judgment, then he came back. He was resuscitated. But he said what really hit me in this judgment scene before our Lord is I couldn't believe how important the little things were in life. Just when I would give a good word to a stranger, when I'd forgive a family member who had offended me, right? When I would go the extra mile to help somebody, or when I would go stop into a church to pray when I wanted to go somewhere else. These little things just were exploding before my mind in this judgment scene, and Christ was so proud of everything. And oftentimes we don't think about that. Jesus is attentive to every detail of our life. And our poverty is at times a gift to help us recognize this is all I got. But Jesus also saw the hypocrisy of those who just came to show up for others. They weren't coming to the temple for God, which is the ultimate hypocrisy, right? They were coming to be seen by others. And that still could be the case. I went to Mass for the first 18 years of my life only because I had to. Only because my family was. It took an awakening in me to realize I wasn't coming for the right reasons. And it still happens. Like, if you're here, God bless you, you're here. But now you're going to get a spanking because you're here. It's like, why are you here? Jesus doesn't care just that you're here if you're not here for the right reasons. If you're here just because this is what your family told you to do, and you're not in a relationship with Christ, and you're not really living for his gospel, why are you here? If you're here just to find some other friends, that's a nice beginning motivation, but that's not why we come to church. The reason we come here is for Christ. And first and ultimately for God. And everything else makes sense only after that. That's why I think it's not the worst sin, but I think one of the most sins we should be most attentive to, that I think is one of the most abused in our times, is receiving Holy Communion outside a state of grace. We believe that the Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. And when someone is not in a state of grace, they're in a state of mortal sin. So to receive the Holy Eucharist in that state is actually a desecration of Christ. And the number one reason people tell me that they receive Holy Communion when they shouldn't is because I'm afraid of what other people will think. It's the number one reason. Well, maybe you're looking in the wrong place. Jesus gives himself completely to us in the Holy Eucharist to inspire in us that same gift back to him. But it only works if our vision is on Christ. God is the one who gives himself completely to us. Jesus is the one who gave himself completely to us on the cross and in the Eucharist. It's a total gift, a total sacrifice handed over. And he continues to give himself completely to us right here in the Mass, in the Holy Eucharist, every single time we come to Mass. And the whole point of us coming here and gazing upon the cross and gazing upon the Eucharist is to draw us into that same divine movement of a total self-gift back to God. Why? Because that's heaven. That's eternity. That's what we're made for. To be a praise of his glory. Totally given, totally received, nothing outside of me, but from the depths of my poverty, my being, and my whole livelihood.